Hello, and welcome to Cheers to Fears, where we take horror films and turn them into drinking games. We're your two hosts. I'm Tucker.
And I'm Alex, and today we are going to be breaking down A Quiet Place made in 2018. The most notable mention of this movie is that it is written, directed, and starring John Krasinski, who most famously played the character Jim in The Office. Krasinski also helped writing the script, along with Brian Woods and Scott Beck. In A Quiet Place, the Abbott's family is forced to live in silence for the rest of their days because of the fear of monsters attacking and killing them.
Along with this, the family must face other dilemmas, such as the daughter Regan being deaf, in a world that not making noise is vital for their survival, and her not fully understanding what sound is, and the mother and father, Lee and Evelyn, preparing to give birth to another child, which goes without saying, will make a lot of noise.
Once again, spoilers lie ahead. So if you would like to watch the movie, pause the video and come back after you view the film. If you want to play the drinking game along with it, we have compiled a list of rules made by the best analysis that horror drinking games have to offer, which is us. Now, on to the video.
The first rule, which should almost be in every horror movie drinking game, is drink whenever you see a death. This rule we include in every drinking game here on Cheers to Fears, but this movie could have possibly done without. That's because we only counted 4 deaths in A Quiet Place.
Next, we have another common horror movie rule that surprised us a little bit with the numbers. For this rule, we had a total of 16 drinks, which happened every time somebody cried, screamed, or yelled. This number isn't as high as some of the other previous films we looked at, but it still seems like quite a bit for a movie solely based on silence.
The third rule for this drinking game is better set for this movie, and not as a basic horror movie rule. That is, insisting you have a sip whenever you see someone visibly trying to make themselves or other people stay silent. This means if someone is shushing another person, puts their fingers to their lips, or covers a mouth, that's a drink. This appeared 10 times on the screen by our count.
Moving on, we had the rule that states you must take a drink when a fire is lit. All we can say is thank God this rule is not whenever you see a fire, because candles were littered throughout the house. With that being said, we only saw 6 fires being lit throughout this movie.
Next on the list is the rule that you are obliged to take a sip once you hear a sudden or loud blaring sound. For instance, this could count as a scream, which would count for another drink because of the second rule, or other things that break the silence, such as the toy spaceship. This rule gave us 12 drinks in total.
Our sixth rule for this game is that you drink whenever somebody sprints or goes down a sand path. This particular rule added on 11 more drinks to our total.
When the monster is spotted in this movie, you drink, is the next rule. In this movie, we spotted the monster 10 times based on our viewing.
Up next, the rules imply that you must take a drink whenever you spot a hearing aid. In A Quiet Place, we only spotted a total of 8 hearing aids.
Proceeding forward with our drinking rules, we have the rule that says you must drink when you hear white noise. This should be relatively easy to point out, considering there is not a lot of noise in this movie. We managed to hear the white noise 7 times throughout the duration of this film.
Finally, we have come to the last rule that had to be included, since everybody was probably thinking of it. We have to drink whenever somebody uses sign language. You would think that they would have used it a lot throughout the movie, since this is their only form of communication, right? Well, sorry to disappoint you, but we only saw 9 different times where sign language was used throughout the movie.
With all of the rules accounted for, we had a total of only 93 drinks in this movie, which is surprisingly lower than any other movie we looked at so far. That is the equivalent of drinking 3 standard 12-ounce cans, and that number is based off of a 30 sip per can scale.
This is by far the least number of drinks we've had for a movie on this channel overall, but still enough to enjoy playing the drinking game. Also, this would be a great movie to pair with another one of our drinking games to make a double feature. So the main reason that this would make a great double feature is because there is not a lot of drinks for a lot of the rules. So for example, screaming, crying, and yelling.
Yeah, like, there's very little of that in this movie compared to other movies, and if anything, there was more crying in this movie. And alongside with that, there were basically no deaths. Like, I think there was only 4 in this movie.
Yeah,
and
they were pretty much absent throughout the movie.
Yeah, but we still included that just because it's a horror movie after all. We should include death.
Yeah, pretty much every horror movie has to have deaths. Almost. There's been some,
but yeah. And then just the overall amount of drinks per rule was pretty low. I think Screams was the highest with 16, and that's not very high compared to some of the other
we've
rules.
had some movies where there's been like 5 above 16, so.
Yeah. On top of all that, we've been watching a lot of Saw movies recently, which, as you all should know if you've watched our previous episodes, is a lot of drinks compared to this movie, mainly because of the traps.
Yeah, it's just that and just the drinks back to back to back to back, just so consistently along with that. The other main thing is we had, obviously, the typical Saw tropes, which happens so frequently throughout the movie.
Yeah, not only frequently, but in big clusters.
Yeah.
This one, the movie was nicely spread out with drinks. It wasn't all happening at once like in Saw.
So I guess on the topic of Saw, I feel like this whole movie is the setup for like a Saw trap almost. So the main thing that comes as an example for this is Nina with a fish hook in her mouth, where she can't scream otherwise she dies. It's kind of like that same setup.
Same premise, just kind of expanded upon.
Yeah, John Kramer doesn't have access to monsters, so he'll do with what he can, just a fish hook and a few rods.
Yeah. Well, moving away from Saw and just going back to A Quiet Place, starring Jim Halpert. John Krasinski's role I thought was pretty good in this film. Like, I feel like it's kind of a surprise, him being the father and the protector of the family. It was a lot different seeing him in a serious role.
Yeah.
But I also feel like he pulled it off pretty well.
Yeah, and just the synergy with the family was very good. You can see this because obviously John Krasinski is married to Emily Blunt in real life.
Yeah.
So you can see the synergy that they had on screen there. It was just a lot easier to actually physically see, just because it's not made up. It's actual feelings towards another human.
Yeah, and on top of Emily Blunt and John Krasinski's relationship, the synergy amongst the whole family was good. Like, you got to see the relationship with the son and the father, as well as the daughter and the mom, and it kind of shows their it shows real life family problems in the situation as well. So it was a nice, I guess, addition to see that in such a high stress situation, because it made it seem a little more realistic.
Yeah, and that's another thing I want to mention quick. So with having such a small cast, like mainly just 4 people in the entire movie, you can add in some other people, but it's mainly just the 4 people.
Pretty much.
With that, I feel like it's a lot easier to kind of have a connection with the characters. It's just one thing that you can focus on rather than a million other plots with a million other people, such as Saw was. So I guess another thing, speaking of the actors, how they can seem so enrolled, that's because I guess the actual actor that played Reagan, Melissa Simmons, she was actually deaf.
Yeah. I feel like that was such a perfect cast for the role, just because she helped in making the environment and the circumstances feel even more natural and realistic, just because it is natural and realistic for her to be signing and, you know, not actually hearing sound, so she can put herself in that world a lot more naturally than somebody else could.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of hearing and sound, A Quiet Place was also nominated for a BAFTA award for the best sound, which it's kind of weird considering there's such a lack of sound.
Yeah, but that's the other thing. Like, is zero sound a good thing or is zero sound a bad thing?
So the way I look at it, because there's not a lot of sound, and like the times where there are sound, it kind of hits harder and it makes you feel a little bit more because of that. Like, you're kind of just sitting there waiting, watching for something to happen, and then as soon as that sound does hit, it hits a lot harder, in my opinion at least. So I think that's probably why I got the nomination for best sound, just because of the way that the sound hit.
I guess the main problem with that I have is a lack of something good. It's like if I hand in something that's a 1-page essay, for example, somebody who wrote a 5-page essay, but that 1 page is written really well. Is it just as much? Does it count as more than somebody else who put kind of more effort into it, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but I do think that just because there's less sound doesn't mean that there was less effort put into it. Same with the essay. I don't think there was less effort put into a 1-page essay necessarily if they did take the time to make that 1 page effective.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think they did a pretty good job, in my opinion.
I guess that was also kind of like carried on throughout the whole premise of the movie. The premise of the movie was silence.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, in saying that, that's the other thing you have to consider. They could have had a soundtrack, but they didn't have a soundtrack. So that kind of let you be more engaged into the movie. Yeah. So for example, this movie, to be fair, I can't really speak because I'm not deaf, but it would probably be a better movie for people that are deaf to watch.
Yeah,
especially horror movie wise, with all the iconic sounds such as the jingle from Halloween or Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
You think of those when you think of horror movie sounds, The Exorcist, and then this one's just none of that. It's just pure silence.
Yeah, and actually, in most cases, I would say having a soundtrack to a movie is way more effective than not having one. But in this case, I feel like if you did have a soundtrack or just even ominous music playing in the background or something, I feel like it would take away from that experience.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of would have made the movie worse in a way, right?
Yeah, that's what I feel like too. And just going on more sound-related content, because it's a silent movie, and then we're going to talk about sound, obviously. The thought of having a baby when they're not supposed to make any sound at all.
Yeah.
In this world, do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, that's exactly it. It's a catch-22. So on one hand, you want to repopulate to rebuild the human race, but on the other hand, it's going to come at a cost. You are putting your entire family's life at risk. So at the same time, it's a good idea to want to repopulate, restart the human race, but on the other side of the coin, it can also put all of you in jeopardy. So it's odd. It's a very odd circumstance that you kind of have to have the debate about.
Yeah, and they did kind of try and plan for such problems, such as having a soundproof cradle, for example.
Yeah.
So they were obviously thinking about how could they bypass these noise problems that they have to deal with, and I mean, there probably is more ways around it, but at the same time, it would be a lot of stress and pretty much a 24/7 job to have to keep that baby quiet.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I do get your point about having to repopulate though, because that is kind of a key thing if you want the human race to continue on. So overall, what was your opinion about this movie?
I like the movie, and I like the fact that it was very, very unique. So just from the lack of sound again, it just kind of made the movie that much better. Where I did mention the soundtracks of horror movies, this one was completely lacking a soundtrack, which weirdly enough made the movie better.
Yeah.
Which is weird to think about with other horror movies having these iconic soundtracks, such as The Exorcist, such as Halloween, whereas this one doesn't. It goes against the grain, but it works out really well. There's a lot of payoff.
Yeah. So yeah, I would agree with you that this film is very unique in more than one way, actually. Another way it's unique is it takes place a lot in the daytime, which is not too common in horror movies. Like, we see it more recently with a couple modern movies like Midsummer and
It Follows.
Yeah, It Follows. And again, that's not a very common thing in horror movies, but they pulled it off pretty nicely. And yeah, I would agree that overall I thought this film was enjoyable to watch because of how unique it is. And it's just a different kind of feel than other horror movies.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So shall we move on to the Darwin Awards?
I think it is time for the Darwin Awards. And finally, we come to the award ceremony, where we award one not-so-lucky nominee the Darwin Award. This award goes out to the character who made a super decision that resulted in them getting killed, someone else getting killed, or simply resulting in something bad happening that could have been easily avoided. This award can also be given to a character who is just plain dumb. Here are the nominees.
Today's first nominee is Regan Abbott for giving her little brother Bo back the rocket that led to his death. To be fair, she was not aware that it made noise, nor does the character fully understand what noise is, like everybody else.
Next up is Bo Abbott for disobeying his father's orders when he said the toy was too loud, but decided to not only take the toy back, but put the batteries back in the toy, which resulting in the toy making noise, which also resulted in his death.
Thirdly, we have the man in the woods whose wife just died. This was hard to put on here because he was likely grieving and wanted to end his life, but regardless, he could have thought about it a bit longer, and maybe not screamed and put the other people within his proximity in danger as well.
Finally, we have Lee and Evelyn Abbott for creating a baby in a world where you cannot make sound.
And the winner is Bo, for playing with loud toys when doing so caused his death. He learned the hard way that if your parents tell you to do something, it's probably for the best.
And with all that being said, we hope you enjoyed today's episode of A Quiet Place. If you end up playing the game alongside the movie, or if you have any feedback, let us know in the comments below. Also, let us know if you think having a baby in this scenario is a good idea or a bad idea.
Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss next week's episode where we take a look at A Quiet Place 2. Thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying cheers to fears.